In the 5th century BCE, a rapidly growing Athens collided with the established dominance of Sparta. The resulting Peloponnesian War devastated both societies. The ancient historian Thucydides watched this unfold and concluded that it was the rapid rise of Athens and the deep fear it inspired in Sparta that made the slaughter completely inevitable. When an established power sits at the top, it begins to view its dominance as the natural order of the world. Psychologists call this status quo bias. From this defensive posture, any sudden economic or military growth from a newcomer looks like an act of aggression, a direct defiance, or even an existential threat. At the exact same time, the rising power develops its own sense of hubris. As its muscle grows, it feels entitled to more global influence and a louder voice in writing international rules. When the ruling power tries to defend its position, the rising nation perceives those actions as disrespect, containment, and an attempt to choke growth. Political scientists call this dynamic Thucydides' trap. Systemic stress, rather than pure malice, drives this friction. As the balance of power shifts rapidly, the pressure of the system creates a severe perceptual distortion on both sides. In this highly pressurized environment, even a minor spark, a diplomatic misstep, or a miscalculated naval maneuver can trigger a massive cascade. Neither side actually wants a war, but both feel compelled to act aggressively to avoid looking weak and losing a strategic edge. To test if this ancient theory holds up in modern history, a Harvard research team built this timeline. It spans the last 500 years, tracking the specific moments when the global balance of power began to shift. They searched the historical record and identified 16 specific cases where a rapidly emerging nation directly challenged an established ruling power. Early examples of this friction-triggering conflict appear in the 16th and 17th centuries, when the emerging French state clashed with the established dominance of the Habsburgs during the 30 Years' War. Or consider the early 20th century. As Germany rapidly industrialized and built up its military, the ruling United Kingdom felt its position was under threat. This rivalry eventually culminated in the total mobilization of World War I. The Harvard study reveals a staggering conclusion. Looking at this timeline, 12 of the 16 historical power shifts analyzed resulted in outright war. The 4 cases that escaped war required deep concessions. This included the 15th century Pope-brokered treaty between Portugal and Spain, and the sudden diplomatic alignment between the United Kingdom, France, and Russia at the end of the 19th century. Based on this 500-year track record, the world appears locked in a fatalistic loop. The historical data suggests that when a major power shift occurs, a devastating 13th war becomes a statistical probability. But treating Thucydides' trap as an absolute rule of nature ignores the ways modern reality has diverged from ancient history. Throughout history, empires mobilized their armies and fought because they believed they could win. The cost of war was high, but the potential for survival and victory justified the risk. This chart comparing the cost-benefit analysis of conflict shows how the invention of mutually assured destruction breaks the historical model. When 2 nations possess nuclear arsenals, the cost of going to war shoots to infinity, erasing any potential benefit. In a nuclear-armed world, total war offers 0 chance of survival. This reality suppresses the appetite for direct conflict. You see this in the mid-20th century, when the United States and Soviet Union rivalry stayed below direct war due to nuclear deterrence. Nuclear weapons neutralize the physical mechanism of the trap. They make traditional military victory a mathematical impossibility. There's another major deterrent ancient empires never had to consider. When Athens and Sparta clashed, their economies were entirely separate. Today, rival superpowers are deeply entangled. As you can see in this visualization mapping global trade, modern nations are bound together by shared consumer markets, complex supply chains, and mutual debt holdings. Separating these intertwined systems is called decoupling. Deliberately cutting those ties is a slow, messy process. If that web suddenly snaps, both economies suffer a catastrophic shock. Supply lines freeze and markets crash, inflicting severe financial damage on both without a single shot being fired. This economic entanglement acts as a non-military failsafe. It makes escalation far too expensive for any rational government to justify. So, if nuclear deterrence and economic entanglement make war irrational, why do modern superpowers still experience such extreme systemic friction? Conflict often originates from within the ruling power itself. History shows that empires often fight because the established power is suffering from internal decay. An established hegemon often faces domestic unrest, economic mismanagement, and political polarization. As the pillar of the state cracks, leaders feel their control slipping. When a society splinters, failing leaders often attempt to unify a divided populace by using a rising foreign power as a convenient external scapegoat. This creates an escalation trap known as deterministic fatalism. If leaders believe war is bound to happen, they stop nesting in diplomacy and launch preemptive strikes, creating the very war they feared. Solving internal economic rot and social polarization removes the political incentive to manufacture an external enemy. A power that addresses its own domestic stability is far less likely to be pushed into the fatalistic logic of the trap.